We're going to have some fun in our last hour here. Joining us is Garnet Schulhauser, and he's a retired lawyer who lives near Victoria on Vancouver Island with his wife Kathy and little dog Abby. And after practicing corporate law for over 30 years in Calgary with 2 blue-chip law firms, he retired in 2008, and his first book, Dancing on a Stamp, was published in 2012. Since the release of his first book, Garnet has been active with book signing tours and speaking engagements and has been a frequent guest on radio talk shows. He's here this evening. We're going to talk about his books, Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirits, and Dance of Heavenly Bliss. Welcome to the show tonight, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Dave. I'm delighted to be here.
Fascinating aspect and topic. I mean, I'm always intrigued by the idea of the astral plane and astral realm, and we hear so many different variations of what goes on and how this happens. Let's dig a little bit, first of all, into your background and what brought you to this journey specifically.
Well, I was raised actually as a Roman Catholic, and then I sort of lost a lot of conviction about that religion as I went into my 20s and 30s, and I was constantly asking myself the big questions in life, like who am I, why am I here, what happens to me when I die, and I was looking for answers. And then one day in 2007, they just sort of appeared out of nowhere. And what happened was I was still practicing law then, a sunny afternoon in May, strolling down the street, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a homeless man jumped out in front of me. And he looked like a typical homeless man. He had long, stringy hair, scraggly beard, dirty, slept-in clothes, and he smelled like a dead fish. But instead of walking around him, as I would typically do when I encountered these people, I just stood there because he had these amazing, dazzling, sparkling blue eyes that shone like 2 little blue stars. And his gaze was penetrating deep within me, right down to the depths of my soul, and I felt like he knew everything about me, everything I'd ever said or done. He knew my deepest and darkest secrets, which was very strange because I'd never met this man before. But instead of feeling violated and running away, I stood there because at the same time his gaze was sending me this amazing gush of pure, unfettered love that was infusing my whole body with an amazing sense of peace, security, and well-being. So I stood there like a deer caught in the headlights until he broke the spell by saying to me, "Why are you here?" Then he promptly disappeared into a nearby store. And when I collected my wits finally, I went into the store to try to find him. He was nowhere to be seen. I went back outside on the street, walked up and down for a few blocks, hoping to spot him, but he had disappeared into thin air. So the next day I resolved I was going to go back to the same street at the same time of day and see if I can find this man. And I went back the very next day, walked up and down the street a few blocks to no avail, and then just before I was about to give up, I spotted him sitting all alone on a bench. And I went up to him and I said, "Who are you, and why did you stop me the other day?" And he said, "I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey." And so that was the beginning of a dialogue I had with this man that went off and on for the next several months. I found out he was actually one of my spirit guides in disguise, and that I was the only one who actually could see him in physical form. Anybody else passing by the bench that day would have seen me sitting on the bench, apparently talking to myself because they couldn't see him. And so he came to answer all the big questions in life that I had, plus a number of other questions that sprang up from the answers that he gave me. And then early on, he told me that he wanted me to write a book about his revelations so they would be available to everyone. And so that resulted in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp.
I've got to tell you, Garnet, that story gives me chills and goosebumps in a way that I haven't had on the show in a long time. And a story I don't think I've ever shared on air. I had, we've talked openly on the show about depression and anxiety, and I'm somebody that has dealt with that through a good portion of my life. And I had a specifically rough time at one point, and I was actually downtown Chicago, and had been walking around in just a really dark funk, and I'd had a little fight with some friends and everything, so I was just kind of on my own and was really contemplating where my position was in the world and what am I doing here? Why am I even here anymore? I just didn't see much of a future. And I bought one of my saving graces is hot dogs. Love hot dogs, make me feel good. I got myself a nice vendored hot dog, and I went and sat down on a bench, and there was this kind of dirty, old, homelessly looking guy next to me on the bench, and he looked like he was crying, and I turned and I asked him, I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No, I'm having a really really rough day. He goes, I've kind of fallen out of favor with one of my kids. They're not talking to me right now. I feel very broken up by this, and I'm not sure how to reach him, and I'm not sure what to do, and I kind of feel like I failed him. And we chatted for a little bit, and this guy just looked hungry as hell. And as we're going, I said, "Hey, would you like this? I'm not really that hungry anymore." And he took the hot dog from me and smiled and thanked me, and we chatted for a few more minutes. And he took me out of the headspace I was in, of this dark void, and I started to listen to somebody else's problem and somebody else's feelings on this, and we just had this very nice dialogue, this very calming dialogue. And like you, this isn't somebody I would have normally engaged in conversation, but I did, and I opened up, and this person opened up to me, and it was somebody beyond just a dirty homeless guy. This was a person with feelings and emotions, and was having a rough day, and here he's appearing to be homeless and all of these other things, and his worry is that he's let somebody down, and he's let his kid down, and his son, who doesn't feel he has him to turn to. And I walked away from this feeling so much more uplifted, not because of the misery of someone else, but realizing that sometimes it's not just always about you, and that, there is this going on. And then something triggered in me, Garnet, and I stopped, and I turned back around and looked at that bench, and there was nobody there. Hot dog's gone, guy's gone, nobody around. And this was a beat-up-looking old man sitting on a park bench, dirty, and you'd have seen him running off or heard him take off. And I had the strangest connection, as though I had just either met God or an angel. And then I started to replay that conversation of, here I'm feeling despondent, dark, and nowhere to turn, and I feel like I have nobody left. And all of a sudden, this guy's got a problem with his son, who he can't communicate with, and feels like he's lost communication and touch. And that just, I cried some really happy tears and was just kind of stood back in awe. But to hear your story, very similar in nature with this kind of feeling, I've never heard that again. That really is astounding to me.
It's an amazing story, Dave, and I think there's no doubt you encountered one of your guides or an angel or someone from the spirit realm who was there at the right time in the right place to change your direction.
Why do you think, for both of us, why do you think that they would take on this guise? Why take on this visage for us to relate to?
I think in my case it was because where I was coming from, Dave, I was a corporate lawyer, blue pinstripe suits and, very much of a stuffed shirt kind of a guy. And I would sort of look down my nose at these people and think, you bum, why don't you go ahead and get a job like the rest of us and get some clean clothes kind of thing. So I was very disdainful of these people. So I think that he appeared in that form to test me, to see whether or not I'd be willing to listen to a homeless man who I would never ever dream of talking to before. And so thankfully I passed the test, because I sat down and I talked to the guy instead of walking away. And so it was a test for me. And I think I'm not sure whether you regarded homeless people the same way as I did, but I would never ever sit down on a bench and talk to a homeless person. But this guy was special, and so it was a test for me.
To me, I never really had a disdain or anything. It was relatively new to me. I did not like the downtown, was not used to that kind of area, but I grew up in a decent, affluent part of Illinois, so that wasn't part of my everyday life. I just often wondered if the reason that he appeared to me this way was because it again took me out of the, if I sat there talking to a good-looking guy in a blue pinstripe suit telling me about his problems, I probably would be, gauging, your problems and mine are not the same here, Garnet. You've got other world problems than I have. But all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody who appears to be in a lower situation than I am, but they're continuing on and they're moving through. And I kind of always felt that it was this dichotomy of things could always be worse. You could have been this guy. And again, not reveling in it, but realizing that sometimes our problems are so small and insignificant compared to the problems of other people in the world, and they find a way to keep moving forward.
No, you're exactly right. And we always think our problems are very paramount, that they're bigger than everybody else's, but the truth is our problems are usually very small compared to a lot of other people. You just have to walk down the street and you can find all kinds of people that have worse problems than we do. We just don't realize it when sometimes we need to somebody has to hit us over the head with a 2x4 to get our attention.
So I've always kind of kept that story close to the vest until just hearing your story, because I've always thought people would thought I was nuts. And I think when I've talked about it as like a dream form for me before, but that was a physical encounter that I had that I've never gotten over, and it always replays in my head, and the physicality of it and everything is just unreal. But to think that, yeah, this might have been a spirit guide or somebody there. When he started making more appearances in your life, it would be when you were seeking him, or would it sometimes just be at a surprise moment?
Well, I was seeking him. I was seeking answers from him because after I found out once I was convinced that he really was my spirit guide, I just was full of questions. So I'd keep on firing questions at him. He would answer them, and what he told me really rang true in my heart, and I knew that he was sort of the real thing.
Did you confront him with that? Did you say, Garnet? Did you say, "Are you my angel? Are you my spirit guide"?
No, he told me.
Oh, okay.
I initially sort of asked him, like, well, who are you? And I mean, really, are you a homeless man? He said, no, I'm really one of your spirit guides. And I'm come here from the spirit realm. I've manifested in front of you physically to get your attention. I'm here to answer your questions. And not only that, but I want you to write a book about what I tell you. So he said, basically, I've chosen you to be a messenger, and so here's your mission. I hope you'll take it. And I said, sure. I mean, I was reluctant at first to write a book because I never even dreamed of writing a book, but eventually he was very gently persuasive, and he convinced me that this is the path I needed to follow. I needed to write a book about his revelations and get it published, and then he would keep on coming back to me, and he said not only one book, but I was going to write 3 or 4 books.
When he engages you with that and gives you this idea that you need to write a book, are you questioning your own sanity at this point, thinking I'm having a hallucinatory conversation with someone who is physically not here, hearing words coming out? You're an intelligent man. You had a good stature in life. It wasn't like you were uneducated or a drug addict or raging alcoholic. At least I'm not guessing at that point. So hallucination probably wasn't just something that you were used to. How did you rectify in your head that this was to make logic of that?
Well, during the course of the conversation, it just became more and more evident to me that this was really a wise spirit, and that he was who he said he was. I was initially a bit skeptical. In fact, when I first went up to him that first day, and he said, I'm here to help you, and I said to him, well, how can you help me? And you can't even help yourself because you've been sleeping on the street for weeks. And he said, well, okay, if you don't believe me, turn around, go back to your office, and see if you can find the answers you've been seeking on all those emails waiting for you on your computer, or sit down and take a chance with me. So luckily I thought, well, what have I got to lose, a half an hour? So I started the conversation, and very quickly I became very comfortable with him, and I realized that, no, I'm not dreaming, I'm not hallucinating. This is really somebody from the spirit realm who's come to contact me. And so away we went from there. It was it was a very enlightening dialogue I had with him.
Would you record these conversations, or was this all just written or memorized and then rewritten at another point?
Well, I couldn't record it because basically after the first 3 appearances physically, we communicated by telepathy. He didn't show up as the homeless man anymore. You can't record telepathic conversations,
right?
Not so far. So then, when I would have a conversation with him, I'd make notes about what we talked about, and then when he was gone, I would sort of go to the computer and quickly type them out, and those notes eventually led to my manuscripts. And so that's how I developed my books, was basically taking notes about what he had told me. And during the course of writing my manuscript, if there was some point that I couldn't quite recall the answer, or I was unclear about, I could sort of contact him and say, okay, can you clarify this point? And he would do that. He was very helpful.
Why, Garnet, why did he choose you to make this appearance, to share this word and wisdom? Why not to Obama or Tony Blair or somebody that's in a power position that millions of readers will pick up this book either to figure out what a wackadoo this guy is or to read the message that he has to share? But it would certainly reach a wider breadth by going to somebody of that stature.
Yeah, very good question. I actually asked him that. I said, like why didn't you come to somebody more prominent, or why didn't you go to an accomplished author like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King instead of me? I hadn't written anything in my life. He said, I have a very good reason for that. He said that he and I had actually planned this encounter before I was born, back on the spirit side. And he said he had chose me because I had some experience writing in some of my previous lives, so he thought I might be a good candidate. But he said that I wouldn't understand fully his rationale for coming to me as opposed to Stephen King until I got back to the spirit side. He said it's very complicated, and it's not something that was in the the life plan for some of these other famous people, but it wasn't my life plan. And so, part of my struggle here, of course, is to go from a total unknown author to try to get my message out to people, and that's part of my challenge in this life.
And see, that's where it always gets confusing because, as you know, I mean, we've been doing the show for 11 years. We have a lot of people that have been given insights from that realm and chosen, and then they have also kind of faced that deal of where they've got to get over the hump of kind of obscurity so that their story can be heard. As an attorney and looking at that, I mean, that comes off sounding like plausible deniability, right? That the reason this isn't taking place and the reason because that was your lot in life was to struggle to be heard on this. But why give it to the hands of people that are going to struggle to be heard and not present it to people that, and J.K. Rowling and Stephen King, fantastic authors, but they write fiction. They write stories of fantasy and other worlds. Nobody would really believe that story or wonder if it was just another work of fiction. But to somebody who, maybe is not a religious zealot or is constantly pounding those things out, I think that's where people have the skeptic side of this, of why this way, why this person, and then if they're going to get this information, shouldn't the walls be tumbling down so that if this is being given, it will be received and found more easily?
Well, I'm still puzzled by that myself. But I mean, Albert, if he wanted to, he could sort of just drop down from the sky, appear in front of the whole world, and spit forth his answers, his revelations. Then everyone would hear it. He could take over the airwaves and appear on TV. But he says that'd be too easy. He's not going to do that. He has to make it more difficult for the people who are to receive the message, and certainly for me to promulgate the message. And so that's just the way he chose it. And I don't quite fully understand it myself, Dave, but he says that's just the way that he wanted to do it. And I'm not his only messenger. He has many others around the world. He doesn't tell me who they are. He may, in fact, be, communicating with somebody that's very famous who has decided that they don't want to sort of come out of the closet and reveal their conversations with him. So there's probably some of that going on. But it's very, he works in mysterious ways, as the Catholic Church like to tell us all the time about God working in mysterious ways. Well, Albert has his own rationale for it. I don't fully understand it, but I just have to live with it.
And does he explain what his echelon is? I mean, where does he rest in the hierarchy? Is he truly an angel? Is he just a guardian? Was he ever in physical human form? What do you know about Albert?
Well, he doesn't tell me too much, even though I've asked him a lot of questions about where he stands. I've asked him if he's a master soul. He wouldn't say that. He says he's a soul like me. He says that he has had previous incarnations on our planet. In fact, he and I have had a few in the past. He's briefly described these to me, and so he won't exactly tell me where he is, but he does say that before I incarnated, we agreed that he'd be one of my spirit guides, and that's one of his roles. He's also tells me he's a special messenger for the Council of Wise Ones on the spirit side. So his role is to speak through a number of people like myself. You may be channeling him as well, Dave. You may not be aware of it. To sort of get the message out to the people in the world that we really need to change our ways, get rid of our negative emotions, and embrace love and compassion. And so that's his mission. I'm just one of his messengers, and but he won't disclose anything else about himself. He's very cagey about that. In fact, at times he's very inscrutable, and which is very frustrating for me.
Doesn't that raise red flags for you then? If they're there to do this, why not be forthcoming and open? Why the intrigue and mystery behind it all?
Well, it's because part of the challenge of a life on Earth. It's a very difficult school that we're into. I would love if every morning I woke up and got an email from Albert in which he set out what I'm supposed to do every day, step by step by step. But he says that's not going to happen because it would be too easy. And that's why we don't remember what we put in our pre-birth planning, because it would be just too easy. It'd be like the teacher giving the students the questions and answers to a final exam before the exam. What's the purpose of writing the exam? Nothing. And so one of our main struggles here is to walk around here on this planet with blinders on, not remembering who we are or what we planned, hopefully trying to find a way, find a path to the light where we can have a better journey and experience the things that we came here to experience. So it's it's all a bunch of mystery. I mean, if the people on the spirit side wanted everyone to know exactly what was going on here, as I said, they could just sort of take over the airwaves, and somebody could appear floating down from the clouds and saying, here, I'm Albert, I'm going to tell you the way it is, and so now everyone knows. That would just make it too easy for everyone here, who would then no longer have to struggle with the questions like, who am I, why am I here, and where am I going when I die?
But even the Bible refers to Satan as appearing as a being of light and love, and will give certain bits of wisdom, but won't give everything that we need. How do we know that what we're dealing with is certainly something that has good intentions and not eventually leading us down an untrue path?
Well, because for my part, it's just a feeling I get when I speak with Albert. I just know that he's full of love and compassion. He's not deceiving me. What he tells me just makes a lot of sense in terms of following the light as opposed to trying to deceive me and send me into the darkness. And I have no doubt about that. He's told me that the devil does not exist. It's a fiction created by religious leaders many centuries ago as a tool to control people through guilt and fear.
Right, but isn't that the number one trick of the devil, to make you believe he doesn't exist?
Well,
I'm not challenging you. I'm just
the devil doesn't exist. So you can play those games all day, Dave. But the fact of the matter is, I have no doubt that Albert's a good guy, and that there are in fact no inherently evil spirits. The devil doesn't exist. And in fact, in one of my trips to the spirit side, I actually met with Lucifer, who is actually a very great benevolent angel, not the prince of darkness that people have maligned him with over the centuries.
Well, then how did he get such a bum PR?
Well, it's just the religious leaders. Somehow they decided that they needed to have a focal point for the devil. They decided that Lucifer was it for some reason, that he was a fallen angel and he was fighting with God, and that therefore he was basically synonymous with the devil. And that's sort of been carried forward, since the very early days. I met with him. He said, totally wrong. I'm actually here. I work behind the scenes to curtail evil and bad deeds. I'm not here to promote them. And so, and he was very enlightened. He was an angel, very enlightened angel, a very positive, benevolent angel. And he also confirmed that now the devil, as described in the Bible and by some of the religious leaders, that sort of person does not exist, never has, never will exist. There are no evil spirits.
There are no evil spirits?
No.
What do you make of these claims of people that are possessed? I mean, that's religion. That's theology is stepping in. There are exorcists that work to help clear people of some kind of negative force and entity. And these people are doing and tapping into things that they should not be able to do. Physical feats, abilities to speak other languages, dead languages. Where do you believe that power is coming from then, if there is no evil?
Well, there are no inherently evil spirits, but there are what Albert calls mischievous spirits who like to play games. The ghosts that haunt houses and so on. They're sort of confused, sometimes misguided, who are doing things not because they're evil, but because they just don't realize that they are dead and they need to move over to the spirit side. And then there's some mischievous spirits who like to play basically what they consider to be pranks on people, except that the people at the receiving end of the pranks often are very frightened by it. But they're not inherently evil, and he said there are no inherently evil spirits, and people supposedly possessed by evil spirits that need to be have an exorcism. They aren't possessed by evil spirits. They're undergoing a psychological condition that is often relieved by a priest going and performing the exorcism. But it's not an evil spirit that's possessing them, because they do not exist.
Fascinating. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll continue our discussion. Garnet Schulhauser, our guest here on Darkness Radio. Revelations that he gave you that you found the most amazing and maybe even took you by surprise?
Well, one of the ones is that the role of God, or the source in sort of our lives and what happens. And, I was raised as a Roman Catholic, as I mentioned, and I was told that, God put us here for some reason, gave us free will, put a bunch of rules in place for us to follow. And at the end of the day, when we died, God would judge us, and if we were good, we'd go to heaven. If we're bad, we'd go to hell. And Albert says, no, that's total nonsense. The source did not put us here. We chose to come here freely on our own, to learn and experience things. So no one made us come here. And secondly, God does not make rules. There is no, in the view of the source, there's no absolute right or wrong or good or bad or, evil on this planet. I mean, things are what they are. And so God doesn't make rules for us to follow. God doesn't control or manipulate events. At the end of the day, there is no judgment. The source doesn't judge us, doesn't punish us. The only people who judge us are ourselves when we look back at the lives we just finished and we decide, okay, I did good here, I did bad here, and I need to improve myself. So that's sort of a major sort of 180 degrees from what I was taught as a child. The other thing that surprised me was that he said that no one on earth dies by accident. We all die when our souls are ready to leave the incarnation. So even though a plane may crash and 300 people on board are killed, it was no accident. All those souls decided that was the time and place to leave the incarnation and go back to the spirit side. So that was kind of surprising to me because it seems like there's people dying by accident every day. And so those are two of the most startling revelations. The other one is that we all have guardian angels that watch over us, and their role is to make sure that we do not, because of the random acts of free will that happen on our planet, that there isn't something that's going to happen that would physically end our physical lives before our souls are ready to go. And if that event is coming up, our guardian angels will actually step in and, if necessary, physically intervene to make sure we don't suffer an untimely demise before our souls are ready to leave the incarnation. So those are some of the more startling things. A lot of people, I'm sure you've already heard many of these things before, but that's coming from my background. Those were the startling things that sort of really made me sit up and take notice.
I know a big bone of contention people have is it's so hard to wrap your head around this, and I wonder what Albert's thoughts were. It's so hard to wrap your head around people making a conscious decision to be a victim of rape or a victim of domestic violence or be a victim of abusive parents, to be a victim of, paraplegic or anything like that, afflictions. How does Albert address that kind of situation, or have you not had that kind of conversation with him?
Oh, no, I have. Absolutely. I had the same questions that you just raised. Like why would somebody want to be born with Down syndrome or be a blind beggar in India or, like you say, be a victim of sexual abuse? He says, difficult for us to understand here because we're using our human minds, looking at things from a human perspective. On the spirit side, he says, that's just sort of like a challenge. It's like, okay, there's some things that I need to experience, and one of the things I need to experience is being on the receiving end of sexual abuse. And it may seem strange for us, but from the soul on the spirit side, it's all about having the experiences and learning the lessons and facing the challenges that we need for our evolution. And sometimes those are things that we need to do. I mean, if we all had nothing but cushy lives, born as royalty with 150 servants each, we probably wouldn't learn very much if that's what we had life after life after life. So sometimes, quite often, we learn more from adversity than we do from all the pleasures that we could receive in life. And so that's why we choose these lives, and we choose many different kinds of lives as different sexes, all to sort of get the full experience of the Earth School. As they say, it seems strange to humans to wonder, why would I choose this life for myself? But on the spirit side, before we were born, we had very good reasons for doing that, and that's just something that we won't fully understand until we pass from this physical plane back to the spirit side.
Doesn't that seem contradictory then, that we're going to learn these lessons, but then when we come back, we have no memory of the lessons we've learned? It seems, redundant.
Well, you have memories of all your lives when you're back on the spirit side. When you're incarnating here, you don't have memories of your previous lives or where you came from, and that's all by design. And so we have to sort of flounder and find our way through. But we do get some guidance. We get guidance from our spirit guides. Everyone has spirit guides. They're always sending us messages, Dave, flashes of intuition, whispers in our mind. Most of the time we don't recognize them for what they are, but they're there to help us, get from point A to point B and finish our journey as best we can. But once you're back on the spirit side, you remember everything, every life you've ever had on this planet.
Now, talk to me about the astral aspect of this. Where does this play in your journey?
Well, that was sort of my second encounters with Albert after my initial dialogue by telepathy. He showed up one night in my bedroom. It was very strange. I woke up and I saw this sort of ghost-like apparition standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And as it moved closer, I could see, well, it was Albert, but he was in astral form. And he said, okay, now for our second encounter, rather than just answer your questions, I'm going to take you to the spirit side, to other places in the universe, other places on your planet, to talk to people, to see things, so you can write about what you see in your next book. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so he then, he basically literally reached out, grabbed my astral hand, pulled it out of my physical body, and away we went, up through the ceiling, up through the clouds, and eventually we ended up passing through a shimmering doorway to the spirit side, where I had an initial encounter with some of my deceased loved ones, and then from there we went on to a meeting with the Council of Wise Ones and many other places that I describe in Dancing Forever with Spirit and in Dance of Heavenly Bliss.
Sounds like the journey of Ebenezer Scrooge, right? These spirits show up, grab you by the hand, and take you from where you are to show you the past, present, and the future, the what it's like around the world, and how life is impacted by what we do.
Yeah, very very similar. Yeah, he wanted me to see firsthand, and I went to very different planets to see civilizations there. I went to different places on Earth to see some of the abuse that humans heap on each other and on animals and on our planet itself. I talked to many wise souls on the spirit side, like Jesus and Moses and some of the other people who regaled me with the stories of their lives on Earth, always giving us a nugget of wisdom. And these are things that Albert wanted people here to hear about and read about by reading my books. And so that was all part of his very deliberate planned agenda to take me places that would enlighten me, and hopefully I could pass on that enlightenment to other people in my books.
When you're having these kind of encounters, these metaphysical forms, how are you differentiating between it being a very vivid, lucid dream and an actual spiritual experience?
Well, the way I differentiated, because whenever I would, come back into my body after an astral trip, I'd wake up the next morning, and the recollection I had of where I had been and who I talked to and what I had heard was extremely vivid in my mind, like extreme vivid details, very lucid. And I remembered those details for several weeks after, long enough for me to get to my computer and write down what I had seen. And I've never had a dream like that. All of my dreams in my history, they're not very vivid, and I usually forget about them after about the first 2 hours of being awake. Not so with these astral trips. That's why I know they were real trips. They weren't dreams, and I feel very comfortable with that conclusion.
Let's take a quick break. We'll continue. Garnet Schulhauser, our guest here on Darkness Radio, and insight into the world and how to make it better. Mm-hmm. Mine will end with, by the way, can you go clear my web browser?
Oh, yeah. Right, yeah.
In exchange for this pearl of wisdom, Garnet, just go clear my web browser, please. I'm begging you.
Delete that browser history in a hurry.
That'll be, that's why we will never be enlightened masters. Tim.
Right, yeah.
The astral realm, the idea that we can communicate, we can leave our bodies and traverse and see and be a part of this, is that inherent within all of us, or do we need our spirit guides, Garnet, to reach in and release us from our physical form so that we can take those journeys?
We actually all do it every night when we sleep, Dave. Every one of us, our souls, leave our physical bodies and we sleep and go and travel to other places around our planet or to the spirit side to huddle with our guides. The thing is that most of the time we do not remember those encounters. So I needed Albert to take me on these trips so that I could, with his magic, I got to remember where he took me and who I talked to so that I could write about it in my books. But you travel astrally every night, so does Tim, so does everyone. You just don't usually remember it.
When you're getting a chance to speak to enlightened masters, Moses and Jesus and these beings, when you're seeing the form of Jesus, is this, because you seem like the God power, the source or universe, whatever, was Jesus a true son of a God, or was he an enlightened master on earth who was able to tap into the innate abilities that we should all have? Because according to him in his book, he does everything that we should be able to do, but he just seemed to be more in tune with how to do it.
Well, he was an enlightened master, as you say. He was a master soul who incarnated 2,000 years ago to try to help humanity get over a hump, to try to make them more spiritually enlightened. He came here with a mission, and he was allowed to remember sort of most of where he came from and what his mission was. And he had, because he was a master, he was able to use the power of focusing his thoughts. The thoughts are nothing but beams of energy. He was able to focus them in a way that he could perform his miracles. So he was able to turn water into wine and walk on a lake and do all those other things and raise people from the dead through the power of very focused thoughts. Because he was a master, he was able to do that. And he did that to attract attention, to attract followers. He wanted people to follow his teachings to hopefully make Earth and humanity a better place.
But were those actual events, or was the idea of raising somebody from the dead, was it a parable of taking somebody who had no, like you and I, at the beginning of our conversation and our journey, we were both at spiritual pathways that were broken, and we weren't sure where to go. Was the idea that Jesus raised somebody from the dead truthfully as we think about it, zombie style, you're dead, physical form done, and all of a sudden you're back to life? Or is it the idea that you're spiritually and morally dead and bankrupt, and it's that reignition like you and I had, that there is something far greater that makes us feel like we have a purpose? Is that what he really did in inspiration or in physical magic, if you will?
Well, we'd call it physical magic, but it was sort of both. He wanted to send a message. I mean, it was a sort of a metaphor for people sort of climbing out of the depths of their despair and rising up to like the phoenix out of the ashes, to have a new enlightened life. So there was a metaphor there, but physically he also did it. Now I don't know whether these people were just in a deep coma, seemingly dead, and he raised them up, but he did use the power of focus thoughts in order to manipulate energy and matter and get these people to be revived. The same way with the wine and the water and walking on the water. So he was able to manipulate matter because of his very focused thoughts, which masters can do, and he's not the only one. Like Moses parted the Red Sea, and there's been other sort of so-called magic or miracles performed. These are just masters who had an amazing ability to manipulate energy and matter on our planet.
Did they have the ability, or when Moses asked for the parting of the Red Sea, was it the work of the angels and the guardians that parted that Red Sea? He just put forth the intention of, we need help, we need to get through this, and I call upon God to part this water, or I call upon energy, universe, whatever, and that's what happened.
It was actually him, and I had a conversation with him, and he said that it was actually him. Again, he's a master, so he focused his thoughts. He actually, he actually said rather than part the Red Sea, he created an interdimensional wormhole that the people escaped through, and it was described as being the parting of the Red Sea. But anyway, he created it. He created the plagues in Egypt that sort of convinced the Pharaoh to let the people go initially before he chased them with his army. So he actually did this. It wasn't sort of God or the source that was working through him. He did it himself, and he did it with the power that, as Jesus has said, that we all have that power. If we learn to utilize more of our human brains, we can do the same things that Moses and Jesus did. We're just not there yet, and these people were very advanced, and they were able to, as I say, to create what we call miracles through the power of their own thoughts.
We are reaching a tumultuous time in history, and probably more now than in a very, very long time, or at least in the last few generations. If it's so important for the other side and our spirit realm and our spirit guides and guardian angels to try to influence us, why are they not coming to each one of us in our astral forms in sleep and leading us down a path of righteousness and peace? Why? That's been part of the problem I've always had with the ideas of aliens and angels, is that if they're there to help, why are they actually not helping? Why is it we're going to wait until you're, SOL, and then we'll step in and kind of clean up the aftermath?
Well, they are trying to help us, but they're not going to sort of go and make it too easy for us. They're not going to sort of just lead us down the path step by step and make it non-challenging for us. We're here for a challenge. The challenge is for us to find our way through the darkness, to find it the path to the light. So they're just not going to give us any shortcuts, and that's just part of the whole grand design of this planet Earth. That's why it's a tough school. And if they were suddenly to do that, there'd be no purpose in incarnating on this planet anymore. It'd be too easy. So it's designed to be very challenging, very difficult, so that's part of the challenge of somebody incarnating on our planet.
We've got very little time left together, about 3 minutes in this. With writing these 3 books, are you in cooperation with Albert on what message you want to get out, or do you both have equal but important lessons that you both hope people take from these books?
I'm basically following Albert's lead. He gives me all the insights. He shows me the things that I need to see and write about. He introduces me to the wise souls that he wants me to talk about. So he's got a very set agenda. He knows what he wants me to write about, and so I just follow his lead, and I'm sort of in his hands, and I follow his marching orders.
What is the takeaway for us as people What should we know and what can we do? Because many people feel powerless at this point in their lives to, affect anything. Our political, our future, our financial status, our lives. How do we start to take that back? What is the message from Albert and the universe on that?
Well, the simple message is that we have to curtail and stifle our negative emotions: fear, anger, hate, greed, jealousy, and so on. Those are the things that cause all the problems on our planet. And in its place, we have to embrace love and compassion. And if we fully embrace love, the negative emotions will melt away like a snowbank in the spring. And that's where we really need to head to. And if we can do that, everything in our lives will sort of come into balance, and we'll feel fully engaged. And that's the direction we need to be headed. But it's not easy, because we all have negative emotions that flare up all the time. And so that's the direction we need to head. And and we need to sit quietly and listen to what our spirit guides are telling us, and they will try to steer us in the right direction. And if we can follow their guidance, then a lot of the violence and conflicts and everything else that we have on our planet will slowly but surely disappear.
Garnet, thank you so much for coming on this evening and sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Dave.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in. It's a great message to leave you on. The last few nights we've talked about bullying. We've talked about the way of the world. It's time to start turning it around, listening to that still quiet voice in our own minds and our soul, whether it's God or our higher selves, our ego, our id. We need to start to focus on the positivity and bring that to the world around us. We can't continue to live in darkness, kicking and screaming and wondering why things don't change. We have innate abilities within us. It's been proven time and time again that we limit ourselves. Every year, some new barrier is broken. How fast we run, how fast we think, how strong we can be. We are capable of so much, and it's time we start to release that and open ourselves to the possibilities of the true nature of what we are inside. And that needs to begin in a place of love. And I know this sounds hippy-dippy to many of you, but to others, I hope that this resonates and that we can all come together to make a better life for ourselves and for the people we love. It starts with you. Start the process today. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of our world. We'll be back with you Monday with Parashare Monday, Supernatural News, and more. For Tim Dennis, I'm Dave Schrader, and this is Dark.